Welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast with Don and Suzanne Manning. Parents, what if we could give you the power to transform your family into something absolutely amazing?
A family where everyone is healthy, gets along, loves Jesus, and has great purpose in life.
Hey, let us flip your thinking to unlock the power God has given you to create your own Crazy Cool family. Hey parents, welcome to the Crazy Cool Family Podcast, still in coronavirus world.
Hopefully wrapping it up a little bit, right?
Yes, it's a little bit maybe less restrictive now than it was.
25% more unrestrictive.
That's right. So we want to talk today and really over the next couple of weeks about marriage.
Yeah, I've just been wondering, how's your marriage? How has your marriage been during this coronavirus season, during this quarantine season, as all the different dynamics have changed and working from home and kids are at home and so we've been wondering about that. And so we want to share with you kind of what we've done.
I was just wondering, like, what's it like when you spend more time together? Is that good for your marriage or is it not so good for your marriage?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
And I would say yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I would say yes. It has been good and it has not been good, all in the same.
And Suzanne and I really want to, this is a subject that we can really be vulnerable with because, we've had our ups and downs with it. I mean, I would say, and Suzanne, you comment on this too. We've never had really a major crisis in our marriage, but also we've always say that we're better parents than we are a married couple. Wouldn't you say that?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that there's lots of reasons, but I think that one of them, it's a lot easier to mold and shape a little person who doesn't really know anything versus a full-grown adult person who has their own ideas and agenda and who's already been raised and molded and shaped.
So one of the things we've done in the last year or so is that we've got involved with a marriage coach, a couple actually. And so what we want to do in this podcast is not only talk about the coronavirus and improving, what's going on with your marriage during this time, but also hopefully you'll learn some things that we've been working on just in the last several months or so that you can put in your young marriage. We've been married almost 30 years and but just as maybe hope of where you are. We're still working on stuff and we still are exploring our marriage, but hopefully we can give you some things that you can work on now in your marriage, even with little kids and things like that. Because the things we're going to talk about are things that you can work on anytime at any whatever level of marriage you're at.
Oh, for sure. And we say all the time when we talk about parenting or anything else that we're talking about, learn from our mistakes and implement what we've learned 30 years down the road now in your 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old marriage. Learn what we're doing right now at 30 years. Bypass those 20 years of learning and use our experience on what we've gained and what we've looked up and we've seen. I mean, like one of the things I feel like that's happened with us is that we were very focused when it came to 7 children. I mean, going 100 miles an hour, going in 10 different directions, it felt like. And so we used the ploy of divide and conquer. And so we spent, I would say, a couple decades of our marriage doing the kids stuff. And so that's one of the reasons that we hired the coach, almost 30 years later, is because we looked up and we're like, okay, wait a minute, who are you again?
Yeah, exactly.
And what do you like? And what do I like? And honestly, when we were married in 1991, we are very different people now in 2020.
And in a good way in many ways because we've matured in our faith. Now, I want to put in a quick plug for our coaches, David and Kanya Wright. We met them through a friend, and they've just been wonderful. They've worked with us for months now, and very really put up with us is what I would say. Definitely. In so many ways.
Yes.
They have a website, Mr. and Mrs. Wright, and it's
WRIGHT.
Yes, isn't that clever? So Mr. and Mrs. WRIGHT, if you want to go see them and they're such a gracious couple, and they have just ministered to us and taught us so many things. Some of those things we're going to go over today.
Well, and what's cool about them as well is that they are also in a ministry and they're running a ministry and they worked for a ministry for a long time. And so they get our ministry stuff. They get our crazy cool family and our heart and our desire for family. And that's what they have. They have a heart and a desire for that marriage relationship.
But I know for Suzanne, I mean, even pre-coronavirus, so we, a couple of years ago, started to work on the Crazy Cool Family ministry that we have today. and we were also in a season where we were starting to not have as many kids. I mean, it's so funny. We have 2 or 3 kids at home, and we're like, oh my goodness, this is easy, because it used to be 7, and people are like, hey, you still got 3 kids at home. We have 3, and I know, but it's just different worlds. But we started to work in ministry together, and I changed my schedule, and so I started to come home. And so this was, like I said, pre-coronavirus a couple of years ago, and all of a sudden we started going, we were working with each other going, hey, we got to learn how to do this, because
this is hard. I'm really hard to work with when I work with you.
Yeah, exactly. And so we started to, so we've been working on some things for a while in our marriage, and a few things that just, there's 3 things we're going to talk about today that we want to go over with you. And so we just want to kind of talk about marriage in general, but also, my point to that is that I bet you're entering a season where you're starting to spend more time together with your spouse. Well, hey, that can go one direction or it can go the other direction. And what are we going to do to make it go the right direction? No pun intended for Mr. and Mrs. Right. But what are we going to do to make it go the right direction, and so that your marriage grows in this season rather than, starts to fall apart more as you start to spend more time together? And one of those is just keeping God central. That is something that is so critical. And even before, it's not like we had a bad marriage before, but I think one of the things we've always done is kept God central in our marriage.
For sure. Yeah. Don and I came to the table and had pretty similar marriage beliefs. I mean, marriage too, but God beliefs, faith beliefs. We started going to church together when we started dating, and then we joined the church, and then we helped build Valley Creek Church together. And so we've been involved.
We've literally been at the same church for our whole marriage.
Yes. And so we do have there is a common ground between us when it does come to God being central. But there is a difference as well, because like for me, I really lean toward faith. I mean, I blindly believe. I have the gift of faith. And so sometimes I don't know if it stress you out, Don, but sometimes I'll be like, just believe we can do this. It's going to be great.
And I'm a little bit more like Thomas. I would have been the disciple that said, I want to see it and I want to feel it. And then but once I believe, I'm going to believe really strongly, and I'm going to not waver but I want to know, I spent the first, probably couple of years of our marriage, all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, I have to lead a family. And what am I going and what do I believe? And what is it? It just challenged everything. And so I have been, I've always been a student of, apologetics and things like that, but especially the first decade of my marriage. So, but still we've always been grounded in the same faith. And even though we may have come at it different ways.
Well, and so how I say it is that Don comes at it with truth. I mean, and he can quote a scripture and he knows where it is and where to find it. And to me, those numbers and those verses, they just get in the way. They get in the way of the story. And so I can totally quote the verse. It might not be word for word, but you get the gist of it. And God and Jesus is in there. And so we actually, with that, while it feels like it's polar opposites, it actually is God's perfect way to match us together, because sometimes I'll kind of get crazy out there with my faith and Don will ground me with his truth. And so it has been a compliment.
I think of it like as truth and spirit. And I know that the first, I think it's really kind of been interesting that the first, 10, 15 years of our marriage, I was very truth focused. And then God started enlightening me more towards the spirit and the faith realm. It's probably flipped for Suzanne a little bit, that she was much more spirit focused at first, and now has really, like when she sees something, when you see something, you will study it more, and you will start to have more of a grounding and things, and you read more books now than you and things like that.
Did when I had 7 small children.
Yes,
for sure.
Exactly. And so I think,
but for me, in the Trinity, the Holy Spirit's by far my favorite. Like, right. I love God the Creator, and I love Jesus and his salvation, but the Holy Spirit is our counselor. He's our helper. He's our friend. Yeah. And so that was definitely the one that I had the best relationship with.
And so we just believe, parents, let's shift to you parents for a minute, that you got to keep God central in your marriage. And so if that's not happening, and then how is it going to happen? We noticed, for example, Suzanne and I did, that and it was challenged by our coaches to say, are you keeping God central in our marriage? Well,
And so one of the ways we were doing that is we were going to church. I mean,
Right.
we were involved in our church. So we did keep God central that way.
and we kept our kids involved in church, and church was a very central part of our lives.
And we talked about God on a regular basis in our family and our life.
Right. And I think, but what I was going to say is that one of the things that we've done recently is really started to pray together much more intentionally. That was not something that we had just letting it fall off over time. And, just.
Well, honestly, I don't know that we ever really built a habit of it. I don't look back. I don't know that we might have in the beginning, but I don't know if it was nursing 7 babies over 2 decades, that made us not go to sleep together, or I don't know what the dynamic was that went in there. But when we looked up almost 30 years later, we realized we hadn't prayed before we gone to sleep for a long time.
Yeah. And that's one of the things parents, parents and married couples, that one of the things we have done that I think
You
that
married people out there.
I tell I have a men's group, and I tell my guys this all the time: go to bed with your wife. Mm-hmm. And they like, well, sometimes this, and I'm like, you can make excuses, you can do a lot of things. Go to bed with your wife, and wives, go to bed with your husbands, because we have done that for years, and I really think it's been something that's been just a hallmark of our marriage. That, and again, it doesn't have to.
Oh,
be,
and I even remember when we drew the line in the sand and we said we would do that. It was our first year of marriage, and Don had been in the habit of, as a single guy, falling asleep in his recliner at night, and that's what he knew. It's what he did. And I, on the other hand, had a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and so there was a season there when it newly married, so we weren't going to bed together. And I just remember, I thought the revelation hit us, and we're like, I can't sleep with the 2-year-old anymore. I can't sleep in the, and you said I can't sleep in the recliner, and we decided at that point we would go to bed together.
And we've done it for years, and it's just something to really make happen.
Focus
in your
on.
Yeah, and to pray with each other as you're going to sleep, and just being involved in the church. Even right now, it's hard. Get your family together, and we've been a little bit up and down with this, but get your family together and watch church online. Dads,
at least your spouse. At least your spouse. And so we heard the other night from a mom who's got 4 little kids, and she said church is impossible. And so they don't. And so put your kids to bed and watch church together, because you are building that marriage relationship, and that is so valuable.
So what are you going to do to keep God central in your marriage during the coronavirus? Another thing that we want to talk about today is just effective communication. And oh, wow, we have really, through our coaches and just through the last, even before that, we've really been working on our communication in our marriage.
I've always felt like Don and I speak 2 different languages. And I think it's a lot because I'm a feeler.
And I'm a thinker, and she feels like that because it's true. She speaks German, and I speak,
Well, I speak feelings,
French,
and you speak
exactly.
logic. And that's literally what it is. And so I filter everything through the lens of how I feel and the emotions of it.
But it's literally one of the things our coaches told us I thought was just so fascinating, is that it literally is trying to think about what if somebody came in and all you could speak was Spanish. And how that would be awkward at first as you tried to speak it. And you think, oh, but you guys have been married for so long. Well, we learned to speak a certain language, and then now we're going deeper. And as we go deeper, we because what happens is, okay, a little bit of training here. Parents, you'll tend to, as you grow older, you'll tend to compartmentalize things. And there will be areas that you won't go there because when you go there, you're going to get in trouble or it's going to cause a fight or whatever. And that's why some marriages, the parents become like roommates.
Right.
But
siloed is what our coaches call it. You're living in 2 silos. And we've been doing that, for a while, because we, like you said, compartmentalized it, and it was easier not to stir up a ruckus than it was to just live, because we were polite enough and kind enough. We didn't yell and scream at each other. We're never mean to each other.
But it wasn't where we were, not roommates in the classic sense of where we were still connected. I just want to make sure that you understand, parents, it's at different levels. And so, some parents really are just roommates. They're existing and they don't have anything to do with each other. We weren't like that. We were friends, and we got along and we talked about it, and we had fun together, but we just weren't going any deeper. And so we just decided that we wanted more. And that's what we've done. And so it's been so fun. It's been fun, and it's been hard all at the same time. It's quite the
sure.
challenge, but to go deeper into that thinking, feeling relationship. And I don't know where you guys are in your marriage, but just to be able to assess what is it, and to start listening and being able to ask questions and communicate with your spouse.
And so that's what I was going to say. Part of effective communication is to listen and to try to understand and to pay attention. And one of the things that we learned is to not assume. They call it assume-aside. Don't assume that you know what the other person's thinking, and don't assign alternative motives to them. And if you've got a track running in your head that your spouse is against you, then change that track to your spouse is for you, because they are. I mean, they are. That is the one point that we were like, I agree, Don is for me. It means he's always for me, even though I might not feel like it or I might not think it. He actually, the truth is, he is for me.
I think so many times in good Christian marriages, that is such a big fallacy that happens, that the husbands, in my case, I see a lot of husbands, because I'm talking to a lot of guys that are going, man, I'm really trying to love my wife. I'm trying to do the right things, but it seems like that when I do things, she twists it into something else that it's not.
Interprets it,
and
misinterprets it.
Misinterprets it and assumes the worst in many ways. And then, Suzanne, I think you hear wives the same thing. My husband doesn't
I do
think of
that.
me.
I mean, so husbands and wives, put them aside. Don and Suzanne, I would do that, because I would need you to say, Suzanne, how do you feel about that? And Don's been doing that, and it's literally revolutionized how we communicate with each other, because he would say something that I would misinterpret that, oh, he doesn't care, when it wasn't he doesn't care. He would say, what do you think about that?
Or sometimes I don't notice things, and so therefore.
Yeah, but that's you.
But I mean, but exactly, but it would hurt your feelings, because if I wouldn't notice you, and now
like I would go get a haircut and my hair colored, and I would walk in, and all 7 of the children would notice it, but Don would go days and days without noticing it.
Oh, the girls started telling me. The girls would be like, Mom, I'm Dad. Mom got a haircut. Dad, compliment Mom.
Notice your wife. Notice your wife.
Yeah. And so many things are, it's good in a way, because I don't notice.
Because he also doesn't notice the dishes in the sink, and he doesn't notice the gray hairs in amongst the haircut and the. Yeah, I agree. It's a good thing.
But learning to speak your spouse's language is, and what better time to practice it right now?
Yeah, when you're 24 hours, 7 days a week together.
Yes, and
it's a crash course in learning their language and understanding it.
Yeah, and so we've been really working hard at that over the last, like I said, several months, couple of years, and you know what? Another thing I'll tell you, parents, is be the one who's going to try.
Yeah.
Because I don't know where you are, but I know that I felt like sometimes that I've started to try, and Suzanne was not ready to try. Mm-hmm. And so, but God put it on my heart to say, start trying. And at that point, you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm trying and she's not. Well, okay, so that can lead to bitterness, but that's where you go back to your connection with God. Because, and I can tell you that, as you try things, sometimes you're going to get hurt, because you're going to try things and then it's not going to feel like they're trying back sometimes. Well, guess who gets to heal that? God gets to heal it. You can't rely on your spouse to be her approval or his approval or whatever. It's got to come from God. And so as you try things, parents, when you're trying for that effective communication, just realize, there's going to be some stumbles. It is like learning how to speak a new language.
And then coming from the other side of that, if Don hadn't tried, if he hadn't pursued me, if he hadn't gone after me, then I think our marriage would be in a very different place than it is right now, because I had become very apathetic about it. And it was just like, okay, whatever. And so if he hadn't gone the extra mile to bridge the gap that had been built between us for all the different reasons, whether it was the offenses or the distance or the kids or, middle-age crisis, whatever it was that created that gap, if he hadn't come come the extra mile. I mean, maybe I would have come the extra mile 2 years, 3 years later. I don't really know. And so that's great advice, to go the extra mile, be the spouse. And I'm talking to the wives, you be the one. And Don's talking to the husbands, you be the one, and do what you can to meet in the middle.
It was either pursue my wife or go get a red Corvette. One of the two. I was like trying to make the call.
Afford the red Corvette because 4 of your children were still in college.
Right. Yeah, so I was going to get a used red Corvette. I was going to get a really used one. But no, really, I remember thinking a few years ago, hey, is this what I want my marriage to be like for the next 30 years?
And so for us, we were never going to get a divorce. Like that was not, we had made that vow long ago, but I do think we had settled in a
routine,
a lackadaisical relationship.
And so, which leads kind of to the last point we're going to talk about, is prioritizing each other.
I would say we're terrible at this. I blame it on having a lot of kids. I mean, I really do. Like I said in the beginning of the podcast, I just think that we got caught up in it. We actually started our marriage as parents. And so we didn't really even get to build that marriage relationship. We started parenting from ground zero. And 1 year into our marriage, we started having kids. Madeline, 18 months later, Macy, 20 months later, Mackenzie, 22 months later, Michael. I mean, it was just every year and a half, 2 years, we added kids. And so we were running the race of parenting. And I think that our marriage just got ignored a little bit.
Some people may not know our story. So, when we got married, Molly, our oldest daughter, was 2 years old, and Suzanne had brought Molly to the marriage. And so therefore we started we never were married just without kids. And so we've had kids for our whole marriage, really. And then we had, like I said, we had babies really quick. But it was, but even that, I mean, we're also very, and I want to say this to encourage parents, because we have a good marriage and it's getting better, but yet we are very different people. I mean, we have different interests.
Well, and we're very independent as well. I mean, and so we're both the baby of the family. We're used to getting what we want. We're used to playing by ourselves. We don't really need anybody to entertain us or play with us. And so Don said we have very different interests, and we don't really care if the other person is interested in what we're interested in or not. And so that's I think one of the ways that we started siloing ourselves is, I think part of it was because we had 20 years of always being needed as a parent. And so we looked up and all of a sudden we had some free time, and we're like, Don's like, I'm going to go work out and I'm going to read a book. I haven't read a book in 20 years. And so we started doing our own independent thing.
But it's not beneficial. I mean, God said the two become one flesh, and he did it for a reason, that he wants that intimacy, and hopefully, and you may be saying, yes, I can relate. I have small children. This is hard. I mean, but what we're telling you is prioritize, fight for each other. And
so some of the practical things is we've started, barely doing is going on a walk.
Yep. But I would even say, and going back to when we were married and things that stabilized, we did make time on our anniversary, for example. We would go out. I mean, we made time for each other. We would do date nights, and
and those were survival, to get away from the children and to look up. And so even in those younger years where I feel like you guys are right now, y'all are on the same team. And I feel like that's what we were. We were a team. It was Don and Suzanne against the 7 children, and that's what it felt like was happening. And so that's where you parents are. We needed each other. We would climb in bed at night and we would talk about the kids and this and that. And that was our common bond. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so if that's your common bond, that is great. And what we're just encouraging you to do is to look at each other also person to person and see the valuable wife or husband that you married and the qualities and the characteristics that they have, and see those and talk about those and encourage those and value those.
And I think one of the things I would recommend to parents is to sacrifice your preferences, is to go and do things that your spouse wants to do. Like Suzanne's a homebody. I like to go adventure, so she started to...
I bought hiking boots. I haven't worn them yet, but I bought them.
Yes. And so I get her outdoors every once in a while, and she would rather stay home and watch a movie. Well,
And eat popcorn and Milk Duds.
yes, and it's usually a movie that I wouldn't watch. I
No,
wouldn't
I keep
choose.
going, can we watch something not intense? Can we watch something funny?
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
No.
yeah,
Because there's nothing out there.
yes, but whatever it is that you're,
Yeah.
just this weekend, she was very talking a lot about wanting to do some yard work, and so we did it, and it was and it again.
And it was great because Don did everything I asked him to do, and then he suggested some things that I hadn't even thought of, and so it was like a win-win.
But it was she had a vision for the front flower bed, and I was like, yeah, go for it. Let's. But just joining.
And he was the muscle.
Joining her in her stuff, or she joining me in my stuff, and it just makes you feel wanted. It makes you feel loved, it just improves the relationship. So another thing we've talked about a lot is reading things together. Just digesting stuff together that helps you to be on the same page about parenting, about marriage, things like that.
And then with that too, just prioritizing each other, also prioritizing the marriage relationship and investing in that. And so in our early years, we would go on a marriage conference, or we would go to we would do a Bible study on marriage. And so I just encourage you to do that. There's all sorts of podcasts out there now on marriage and all sorts of books on marriage. We've got a book coming from Focus on the Family called Reconnected that we're going to work through, and they've got a Cherish series. And so anyway, just prioritizing that relationship of itself, because sometimes I feel like that marriage relationship, because it is two adults that are mature and they can feed themselves and take care of themselves, it almost gets neglected because you've got all those other relationships with the small, very dependent children, and that's where all the energy goes. And so we just encourage you to focus and pay attention, prioritize that marriage relationship.
Because as we wrap up here, if you look at our Crazy Cool Family dashboard, you see that marriage is right in the middle of it. And marriage is a foundational relationship in the family. Now, you may be a single parent, or you may have a marriage that's on the rocks or whatever. And so, Crazy Cool Families can certainly survive bad marriages, or lack of marriage, single parents, that they can all survive that. But if you are married and if you are two believers, then let's not neglect that relationship, because
Right.
it really is foundational. Genesis 2:24 said, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh."
Isn't it crazy that it says one flesh? It doesn't say one soul, one spirit, one mind. It says one flesh. And isn't that insane that the flesh is actually where we sin the most? I mean, that's the part where we ask for forgiveness. And so that's the place where we need to die to ourselves the most. And so it's no small thing that God gave us another person to join us in the flesh to help us be the sinless people that we are. Self-sacrifice in marriage is the number one thing that we need to do to become one. I just jazzes me to think, okay, God, he knew what he was doing when he gave us our spouse. He knew what he was doing when he knit us together in one flesh to help process our selfishness.
Yeah, Philippians 2 says that in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. And so, if that's a great example, if you want, have a Philippians 2 marriage and say, hey, I'm going to be like Jesus, and I'm going to look out for my spouse, and I'm going to pursue this person. God wants you to be one flesh. He wants you to die to yourself, and he wants you to pursue and love your spouse. It's a foundational relationship. And you're always going to be pursuing it. And no matter where you are in your marriage, hey, I'll end with this. If you got two believers that want to pursue God, that marriage can work. And Suzanne and I are just living proof of that. We're two very different people, but our common bond is we love the Lord. And we have, and we love our kids, we love our family, and that has allowed us to.
And we actually love each other.
Yes, we do.
And then
Yes.
there's that.
Yeah.
But it does come, third down there after we love the Lord.
Yeah. But I mean,
Our flower beds, our dog, and all.
you don't love me more. You don't love the dog more
Oh, you're
than me.
way above the dog.
Exactly. But there's hope for your marriage. There's hope for your marriage in the coronavirus season. We are, we're experiencing great hope in our marriage right now, and we want you to experience the same thing.
For sure.
And no matter where you're at, hopefully you're in a good place, then go to a better place. And if you're at a bad place, then let's get to a good place, and God's going to help you get there. So, okay,
I just don't feel like we can wrap up a marriage podcast without talking about sex. And so you, at least just to close it up, guys, that is the number one way to bond. I mean, if all else fails, do that. Have that. Be that. I mean, you can't, right? I can't possibly. Suzanne Manning cannot do a marriage podcast and not mention sex, right, Don?
True that. Can't do really much anything without mentioning sex.
And so you have to. And so we've got all of our points there for you. Of course, keeping God central, communication, prioritizing each other.
That's a sex thing, prioritizing each other.
Most definitely. Yes, most definitely. Husbands, if you want to have sex that night, then you let your wife sleep in that morning, you know, and you clean the kitchen for her, and you do those things.
Do that yard work outside.
Yeah, do that yard work, exactly.
All right, parents, hopefully you get
this is where it's possible. Go be crazy, right?
That's right. Go be crazy, yes. Go be crazy, marriage crazy. crazycoolfamily.com.